Thank you for joining me for another video. Last week we finished up with Parashat Bereshith, which is the very first Torah portion in the annual Torah reading cycle in the synagogues, which is crazy because it was like almost 2 full months ago that we actually read Parashat Bereshith in the synagogue. So I think that's funny. But we're taking it one step at a time. We're walking through this at a reasonable pace, I think, as opposed to reading it all at once and then me just kind of sitting back and just being like, yeah, figure it out for yourself, man. I don't care what you think. To be fair, I don't really care what you think, but the purpose of this is to give you my interpretation of it, to give you my understanding of it, which may be different from other Jews, maybe the same as other Jews, but the idea is to kind of open your mind a little bit more to other possibilities that maybe you hadn't considered. That being said, this week we're beginning Parashat Noach, which is the second Torah portion that we read in the synagogues. And this one, like Bereshith, is a very long one. It's funny because the ones at the beginning of the year are always longer than the ones at the end of the year. At the end of the year, you're looking at like a chapter. At the beginning of the year, I mean, you're looking at like 6 chapters. So there's that. So now, all of that being said, this is a long story. This is a very long narrative, the Noah narrative. It's a very long one. It takes up like 3 chapters, I think. So we are going to break it up into bite-sized portions, and as we go, maybe I'll read a little bit more to speed things along. Maybe I'll focus on 1 or 2 verses. Who knows? Who knows? Right, but today we're going to focus on, I think, like 7 verses. So, that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. We are in Genesis chapter 6, verse 9, and we're going to read to verse 16. So it says, Ele toledoth Noach. These are the generations, or you could say this is the history, I suppose, of Noah. Noach ish Sadiq, tamim haya bedorotho. Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generations. Et ha-Elohim hithalech Noah. Noah walked with God. Vayoled Noach shlosha vanim et Shem et Ham with Yafeth. And Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Yafeth. Traditionally, it is assumed, just to kind of throw this out there, traditionally it is assumed that they were born in that order. Is where they were born in? Well, I don't know. I wasn't there. Okay, but that is the traditional order. So let's maintain tradition as long as we can until we see something that really just sort of stands out against the tradition, and then perhaps we need to talk about it a little bit more. Let's jump into, what am I in? Verse 11. That the earth, or the land, I would translate it here as land, I think, was, let's say, corrupted. Okay, it comes from the same word as to destroy. So it could mean that the land was destroyed. It could mean that the land was destructive before God. The word that it's using here for God, ha-Elohim, is God in his capacity as judge. It's also worth noting that it could be an allusion to earlier tablets that perhaps this story was originally written on, back when Israel's forebears were polytheists, and the word ha-Elohim, without any verbs to tell me its number, could technically be plural. So we could be talking about the gods. And you're going to see that at various times it switches between Ha Elohim, the God, and just Elohim, God. Perhaps that's a nod to before the Torah was given, back when Israel's forebears weren't exactly monotheists. Perhaps they believed in the existence of other gods. In fact, we have very good evidence to say that they did. They may not have been polytheists, maybe monolateralists, meaning that they believe in more than one God, but they only worship one God. And that certainly seems to have been the case with Abraham. But we're not going to talk about that today. Continuing on in verse 11, so it says that the earth was corrupted, or that it was destructive or destroyed before God. Watimale haaretz Hamas. That last word may be a little bit political. Hamas. It says that the earth was filled, or the land was filled with Hamas, violence, or there are several different possible translations of it. The idea, though, is always violence. It's violent crime. Okay, we're talking robbery, rape, murder. Violent crimes that are a serious affront both to God and a moral society. So we can see, as it's setting up the flood narrative, we can see that it's telling us, listen, man, this country, this land, it was very corrupt, government-wise, and it was very, it was filled with these violent crimes, and that really sets the stage for the flood. It tells us what's going on, tells us why the flood is coming, and it really helps to, I don't want to say justify, but it helps to, let's say, vindicate God for having sent the flood in the first place. This civilization was not compatible with moral decency. Okay, and that's really kind of a synopsis of everything that the sages say about it as well. Verse 12. Vayar Elohim. Here's the word Elohim without that definite article. Ha, the God. Here it's just God. Vayar Elohim et haaretz. Somebody is having a blast out there with their engine. Wow, man. And that completely threw me for a loop. Okay, let's start this verse over. Vayar Elohim et haaretz, and God saw the land. Now they're spinning out. That's funny. Vehine nishatha ki hishchit kal basar. Because it says, and behold, it was, let's keep translating this as corrupted, because all flesh corrupted, all flesh corrupted its way, al haaretz, on the land, or in the land, or on the earth, perhaps. Vayomer Elohim leNoach, and God said to Noah, Kes kal basar ba. The end of all life comes lifanai, before me. The end of all of life has come before me, or the end of all flesh, I should say, has come before me. Not all life, but all flesh. Ki Malaha is Hamas, because the land is filled with, let's keep with violence, Mibnehem, through them, through these people, this human beast that I created. Vehineni mashchitam et haaretz. and so I am going to destroy them from the earth, or destroy them with the earth. Really kind of depends on how you want to translate that one. And you could see here, mashchitam, I will destroy them, is the say. It sounds similar to the word for corrupted here, which is tishachet. So tishachet and mashchitam actually share a root. They are both the word destroy. I've translated it in reference to the land as corrupted, but in this case it merits destruction. It merits to be called destroyed. So we are in verse 14. God says, he says, you should build a box. Usually the word teva is a box. It's an ark. In this case, gofer, from gofer wood, gofer branches. You should make rooms in the ark. B'chafarta othach mebayith umechutz bakofer. So it says, and you should cover it or pitch it, tar it. Let's say laminate. Okay, I actually read a translation of it that said laminate one time, and I was like, "Wow, that's what I haven't figured out before." Laminate the wood, or coat it, I guess would be a good translation. It's from the word to cover, from the word kapar, which means to cover. That you should cover it from the inside and the outside, bakofer, with pitch, right, with tar, with a waterproofing agent. Okay, we're in verse 15. وَزَا أَشَرْ تَغَسَّ أُثَّحْ, and this is how you should make it. Shlosha me'oth amma, 300 cubits. Orech hateva should be the length of it, of the ark. Hamishim amma rahbah, and 50 cubits for its width. Ushloshim amma qomathah, and 30 cubits its height. So we're talking about 300 cubit long by 50 cubit wide by 30 cubit tall, rectangular cube, basically. And that's going to come into play a little bit later on. And verse 16, Sohar ta'aseh lateva, you should put a so sohar is kind of difficult to translate. Some translations call it a window, some call it a light. There's even a tradition that it was a gemstone that reflected light around. I like that one, because it just sounds like, ooh, magical. It sounds very cool. It may not be historically accurate, or perhaps the sohar was like you put a torch behind it and it was a stone and it just refracted the light to everywhere, which would give it kind of an eerie glow, I think, but it would be more along the lines of a lantern. Okay, so we're going to translate it here as light. So you should make a light for the teva, for the ark. Ela amma techalena milma'a mima'Allah. Wow. Whew. That's a hard one right there. It says that you should make it upward, like finish it upward to a cubit. I actually had to look up different interpretations of this. Some say it means make it a cubit wide at the top. Some say that it means that everything is going to fit together but be slightly off by a cubit, so that when the water pressure comes in, it'll actually push it all together. I prefer that first interpretation, that it means to, the top of it is going to be, slanted like a roof with a cubit width at the very top. That's what I prefer to understand it as, but I'm open to anything. يفتح هتفا بسيدة تسيم تحتم شنيم وشلوشيم تغسها. Wow. It says that you should put the door on the side, or the entrance on its side, and you should make it with first, second, and third levels, or bottom, middle, and top levels. So that is a lot. It's a lot of reading. It's been a while since we've read that much, okay? But let's go ahead and jump into that. So the very first thing that you're going to notice is that the text tells us that Noah was a righteous guy, which is actually kind of chuckle-worthy, all things considered. If you know how the story ends, you know what happens after the flood recedes and everything. You see that Noah went out and got drunk, though technically not a sin. It's not exactly something I expect a righteous person to do. So that is kind of chuckle-worthy. Now, I hear from Christians all the time, and by all the time I just mean like occasionally. It's not like, I have Christians hounding me about this, that a human being cannot be righteous, right? That humans are incapable of righteousness. And that fits perfectly fine into the worldview of Christianity. It actually helps to build the case for accepting Christianity, accepting Jesus. There are, it's typically your evangelicals who are going to get on that. I haven't heard anything about it from the Catholic Church in a very long time. And when I heard it, so I have a priest friend, a Catholic priest friend, that he and I were talking about it one time, and he just said, yeah, I mean, the church has its own doctrine, but really we don't care. Okay, all right, that's fair. I get that. The funny thing about Christians telling me that people can't be righteous is, A, the text right here very plainly tells us that Noah was indeed righteous. Not only does it say he was righteous, it says he was perfect in his generations. But just in case they don't want to accept that, just in case they've got this whole, that was before Jesus, that was before the Gospels kind of thought process going on, which frequently happens, strange as it may seem. The New Testament, right, the Christian Bible, and the Gospel of Luke actually tells us that the parents of John the Baptist were righteous. It tells us that they were perfect. Well, maybe not perfect, but it tells us they were righteous. So there's clearly a different definition of righteousness between the Jewish understanding as well as the first century Christian understanding and the modern Christian understanding. Righteousness does not mean you don't sin. It can, but it doesn't have to mean that. And I'm gonna... that's loud. Wait for this guy to pass. I'm going to really kind of break down for you the Torah's definition of righteousness. That's the only one that matters, because it gives us God's opinion, and if we have God's opinion, it doesn't matter what my opinion is, right? It's like the people, when I posted my Zionism video, who disagreed and left nasty comments that have since been deleted. It doesn't matter to me what they think about Zionism, because the fact of the matter is, they're not opposing me. They're opposing God. I mean, yes, they're opposed to me, but they're opposing God. And that's not my problem. It's theirs. So, just figured I'd throw that out there. The Torah's definition of righteousness is not necessarily someone who has never sinned, although it certainly does mean that. There are actually a couple of, well, I say a couple, a few people, it's like a handful of people, that the Talmud actually specifically tells us they never sinned, right? And we remember them as tzaddikim, as righteous individuals, right? But you don't have to do that to be considered righteous. No, what makes you righteous is not whether or not you sin, it's what you do after you inevitably sin. Because with the exception of a handful of people, according to Talmud anyway, nobody has ever gone without sinning their entire life. And it is theoretically possible. Just throwing that out there. Theoretically, it is possible to never sin. Noah, I think we can say, in this case, that he probably, at least up until this point, didn't sin. And I only suggest that because if he had sinned, I think we would have been told about it in the text. I could be wrong, though. But, you know, when you've got a book that, you know, bashes the prophet who wrote it for sinning in the very first chapter, I'm talking about the book of Jonah, you know, if you're going to bash a prophet of God, okay, so here, just a regular guy, tells us that he was righteous. He probably had not really sinned. Nothing grave, anyway. Maybe a few sins of omission, but nothing, you know, where he went out of his way to intentionally sin. And the sages actually fault Noah for that, for not going out and letting people know, hey, there's a flood coming. He just sort of, you know, stayed at home. They compare and contrast Abraham with Noah. They say, yes, the text says that Noah was righteous in his generations, says he was perfect in his generations, but that's only in his generation. That's not, if he had lived in the time of Abraham, he would have been, you know, nothing more than a footnote, if that. Because while Abraham went out and we're told that he had guests, that he was hospitable, he welcomed guests that he didn't even know into his tent, with his wife, which I think is a little bit on the dangerous side, but hey, he did have at least 318 armed men with him, so I think he can handle a few visitors every now and again. Noah, we're told, nothing in that same line of thought. Noah, from what we read in the Torah anyway, does exactly nothing for anyone who's not a part of his family. That, you could call it a sin of omission, you could get away with that, but I don't necessarily know that I would go so far as to say that, right? So what is righteousness according to the Torah? Well, righteousness is not sinning. It's not refraining from sinning. Righteousness is when you do inevitably sin, you make amends for it, you repent, and you try to make it right. Then you never, ever, ever do that again. That's what makes a person righteous. That's why David is considered according to the text of the Tanakh itself, he's considered a man after God's own heart. Why does God, is God into all the sins that were specifically told David did? Well, no. But David repented right there, every single time. He's like, oh man, I said this whole thing with Bathsheba. Oh man, you're right, Nathan. I messed up. I messed up. I need to go repent, but first I'm going to pray for this baby's life, right? Those of you not familiar with the story, I encourage you, go read the Book of Kings. Wonderful story. Kings, and actually I believe this one is in Samuel, the second book of Samuel. I believe it's also mentioned in Kings. I believe it's also mentioned in Chronicles. Those three books tend to have a lot of the same information. Now that being said, where does Noah fall in all of this? Well, he strikes me as not being the type of guy to intentionally screw up, but perhaps the type of guy who accidentally sins, and after he sins, he corrects himself. And that's why the text can get away with calling him righteous. It's not that he never did sin, although we're not actually told about any sins that he committed. But it's, when he did sin, he repented, just like David. So, grab my glasses so that I can see where I am in my notes. Oh, and just for the record, the other Mesopotamian traditions connected to Noah, that would be the traditions about Atrahasis, which is the Akkadian version, Ziusudra, Utnapishtim, these epic heroes of the flood story in the ancient Middle East. Well, as it happens, they're all part of the same flood story as the biblical Noah. So, they also mention that Noah was righteous. In fact, Atrahasis, the name Atrahasis, literally means like exceedingly devout. Like he was a devout guy. He was kind of a big deal. If that's what everybody remembers about him, that he was a righteous dude, he must have been a good guy, right? So there's one more thing that I wanted to talk about, and then we'll call it quits for the day. And that is, wow, I can hear my kids screaming from way at the other end of the house through several closed doors. That's exciting. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So I've got one more thing that I wanted to discuss in this video, and that is the ark itself. What was it made from? So we're told, go through what I left it untranslated, and most translations of the book of Genesis will leave it untranslated. Some may translate it as cypress or cedar or sycamore, I think I saw one time. The truth is, nobody really knows what the word gopher means, because this is literally the only time in the entire Tanakh that the word is actually used, which leads me to believe that we're not talking about a term that would have been used very often in later narratives. So we're talking about something that perhaps existed in the region of Noah that perhaps did not necessarily exist in later generations. There are several different possibilities for how to translate it, but I think that the one that appeals the most to me, anyway, is it is connected to the word, the Akkadian word Gapiru, Giparu. Like I said before, I get vowels mixed up sometimes. Giparu, which means reeds, like how do you call it? Like in Florida we have cattails. You've got them all over the place, I'm sure, but reeds, like these thin, hollow, oftentimes round, essentially grasses, aquatic grasses, and they grow like weeds because, frankly, they are weeds. They're reed weeds. They were frequently used in construction in the region of ancient Sumer. One of the things that they were used to build would be like buildings. Okay, you just grab a bundle of these reeds, you bind them together, right? You just a bundle of them, you tie them together, you connect those bundles with other bundles, and so on and so forth until you've managed to build what could be a wall. Then you erect that wall, build more walls around it, and boom, you've got a house. Well, you should probably put a roof on it, but you've got a house, right? Another thing that they used to use these reeds for is boats. Sounds counterintuitive, but I swear it's true. And any archaeologist, any historian, anyone familiar with the region will back me up on that. They would take these reeds and bind together bundles of them and attach the bundles to each other, and they would put pitch, which is a petroleum product, basically tar, on the inside and the outside of these. Now I'm hearing them screaming outside. They would put the tar on the inside and the outside to waterproof these vessels. That makes all the sense in the world when we're talking about the Ark. Okay, and I am inclined to believe that this is a reed vessel. Okay, there are other interpretations of the term gopher. Some try to translate it to very little success. There's also one that I saw that assumed, actually I think I wrote it in my notes, give me just a second. Yeah, they just assumed that it was a type of tree, a species of tree, a timber tree that is extinct, which makes sense if it was a locally occurring tree that the flood just wiped out completely. Since I don't believe that to be the case, I'm more inclined to go with the Giparu interpretation that it refers to reeds. Another thing that I think is very interesting is that the word kinim, in the text here refers to rooms, and the tradition is to interpret it that way. However, if you vowelize it as qanim, it means reeds. So that's part of what leads me to believe that perhaps, if you've got these two words that both could very easily mean reeds right next to each other, so it probably refers to a reed boat. Okay, and here's something that I think is very interesting. I'm going to put my glasses on. This is kind of my last thought that I had for you today. In the Akkadian version of the flood story, the god Enki, which we've already associated with an early understanding of Hashem himself, the god Enki warns Atrahasis, who is the Akkadian Noah, to tear down his reed house and build a boat with it. So we've got at least one other ancient witness, one other ancient tradition that testifies that this boat is made of reeds. It also, the Akkadian version also says that it was cube-shaped. Now, in the Torah, it tells us that it was a rectangular cube. In the Akkadian version, we're not actually sure. It could have been a square cube. I don't know. I wasn't there, and I didn't write the story. I didn't put it in anybody's text anywhere at any point in time. Okay, and I'm going to have to go give my kids a very stern talking to here in a minute. But in all fairness, the Akkadian version does line up fairly well with the Torah's version, but what it doesn't do is it doesn't make up for the fact that there are some other versions of the story in which the boat is circular. which was very common at the time, or that there are traditions that it was made of wood, like timber wood, like cut down an oak tree, mill some boards, and boom, there you go. So I'm not trying to say that identifying it as a reed sea craft is for sure what everybody agrees on, because for sure not everybody agrees on it. But it is an interesting possibility that I happen to accept, and they've actually, in modern times, if I could say modern times, last bit of the 20th century, early part of the 21st, as opposed to the late part of the 21st that we haven't lived through yet, they actually built reed vessels, coated them with pitch, and they wanted to test, could this float? Could this be made into gigantic proportions? And yeah, they found that yes, it absolutely could. It absolutely would work, and it wouldn't get very far, but like, where are they going? There's a flood. Where are they going? Are they sailing to Miami? Where are they going? You don't actually have to go anywhere. Somebody mentioned at the synagogue a couple of weeks ago when we read this portion that he was talking to a friend of his who mentioned that, so I'm hearing this information third hand, that the dimensions of the boat, of the ark, that are given in the Torah, are perfect for a vessel that's just meant to kind of stay where it is and just sort of bob in place. For sure it's going to move around a little bit, but it's not designed to go anywhere, because again, where are they going to go? Are they sailing to Miami? Are they sailing to, what, New Zealand? They have an appointment down in Madagascar? What? What's the point? Where are they going? We'll eventually find out where they're going, but, the idea here is they're not trying to get anywhere, so it doesn't matter how slow this vessel is. All that matters is that it floats and has the capability of sustaining a population of people and animals for a certain amount of time, which all the ancient traditions disagree about. So it appears that each culture remembered the story as an historical event, but they all remembered it according to the lens of their own individual cultures, and we're going to talk more about that possibly next time, but for sure in coming videos. That being said, I am done. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and hit the like button. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and make sure your notifications are turned on so that you get alerted whenever I put out a new video. If you're on Facebook, that's wonderful, so am I. Come find me, just type in an Unorthodox Jew in the search bar. You should see me pop up immediately. Feel free to interact both in the comments here on YouTube and on Facebook. Feel free to ask questions. If you have any questions about anything, and I actually am going to be God willing, getting into a video about the various Jewish sects during the Second Temple era, the end of the Second Temple era, and should have that out this coming week, some point in the middle of the week, like Wednesday, Thursday, sometime around there. But if you have questions, if I didn't make it clear that this upcoming video is going to be in response to a question, if you have questions, go ahead and ask. You can ask in the comments here, or feel free to ask me in a private message on Facebook. That being said, I am done. So until next time, shalom.